All right, welcome back. In our last discussion on Chapter 1, we really established a difficult concept that a commodity's value is this strange, almost ghostly thing. It's not physical, it's purely social, a manifestation of abstract human labor. So today, in Chapter 2, we get to the practical side of things. We're moving from the abstract idea of value to the very real problem of how it gets realized in the world. Let's dive in.
So this is the fundamental puzzle Marx sets up for us. If value isn't something you can physically see or touch, if it's just a social relationship, how on earth do two separate individuals actually agree on a trade? How does the weaver convince the coat maker that, yes, these 20 yards of linen are in fact worth one of his coats? This isn't just a simple economic haggle. For Marx, it's a deep social and logical problem that he's going to unpack for us step by step.
And where Marx chooses to begin is really telling. Before he even touches supply and demand or market prices, he first investigates the hidden social and legal framework that has to exist for any exchange to even be possible. He doesn't start with the things themselves. He starts with the people who own them and the social rules they live by. He's excavating the foundations of the marketplace.
And here you have the absolute core of the argument. The commodities themselves are passive. You know, a pile of linen and a coat don't just decide to trade with each other. The real drama of the market is entirely human. It's a relationship between persons that is just mediated by objects. For those objects to actually change hands, their owners have to first relate to each other in a very specific contractual way. Marx's language here is so precise, you have to appreciate it. The owners are guardians. Their will, which means their legal right and their personal intention, is said to be living inside the objects they own. The commodity is literally a vessel for the owner's will. And to exchange it is to alienate it, another key term, which is to formally and voluntarily surrender your rights to it. The object only acts because its guardian wills it to.
So here's the absolute precondition, laid bare. A market society can't function without this shared legal understanding. We all have to mutually recognize each other as free individuals, as private owners who have the exclusive right to get rid of our own property. And this can only happen through mutual consent. A contract. And this is crucial. Marx insists this isn't some natural state of being, it's a very specific historical legal framework. Without it, you don't have a market. All you have is theft or maybe gift-giving.
Okay, so now that we have this legal foundation of private ownership established, Marx can finally move on to the actual mechanics of exchange. And he starts, as you'd expect, with the most basic form imaginable. Direct barter. And this is the immediate problem, right? If your whole society is just a collection of these individual guardians, each holding their own unique product, how does that system possibly work for everyone? How does it become the social metabolism that keeps society running? What might seem simple enough for a one-off trade between two people quickly becomes incredibly inefficient and really just impossible as the basis for an entire society.
This slide gets right to the heart of the contradiction. In barter, or C for C, the thing I own is my only tool for exchange. But for a trade to actually happen, I have to find someone who not only has what I want, but who also happens to want the exact thing that I have. This is that famous double coincidence of wants. As society develops and you have more and more different goods, the mathematical probability of that happy accident happening for everyone all the time just plummets. The system chokes on its own complexity.
And right here, we see a classic dialectical move. The very success of production, making more and more different kinds of stuff, makes its own primitive form of exchange totally obsolete. Society's increasing wealth of goods creates a systemic gridlock that simple barter just cannot solve. And this internal problem creates a real objective social need for a new solution, for a more advanced way for value to express itself.
This brings us to the dialectical core of the chapter. The solution to the problem of barter doesn't come from a government issuing a decree or some genius inventor. Marx argues it emerges organically. It bubbles up from within the world of commodities itself as it struggles to overcome its own limitations.
Through countless individual acts of trading, all these commodity owners, the guardians, they just discover that some things are way more desirable than others.
It's a messy, unconscious social process. But over time, one particular commodity gets pushed into this unique position. It becomes the one thing that pretty much everyone is willing to accept in a trade, not because they want to use it themselves, but because they know for a fact that everybody else will accept it from them.
Now, you should recognize this form from Chapter 1. It's the general form of value. But the key difference here is that it's no longer just some abstract, logical step. It now has a social origin story. It emerges as the solution to the impossibility of widespread barter. All the other commodities, in their search to express their value and actually become exchangeable, start relating themselves to that one single commodity that society has unofficially set apart.
And the result is a pretty profound social transformation. That one commodity, the coat in our example, is suddenly elevated. It becomes a kind of universal mirror. Every other commodity can now look into it and see its own social worth, its own value, reflected back. A universal language of value has just been created, and this allows for systematic, large-scale exchange.
And this is the formal definition Marx gives this special commodity. It is now the universal equivalent. Its own physical use value, the fact that you can wear the coat, is totally eclipsed by its new, powerful social job, to be the direct embodiment of value itself. Its physical body becomes the visible incarnation of that invisible social substance, abstract human labor. This is a huge qualitative leap.
So, this brings us to the final step in his argument. This social job of being the universal equivalent, which at first might be kind of fluid, doesn't stay attached to just any old commodity. Through historical practice, this role eventually finds a permanent home. It crystallizes onto a specific kind of object.
The role of money, Marx argues, isn't arbitrary. History and social practice slowly figure out that some things, like cattle or salt, are actually pretty bad at doing this job. They're hard to divide, they spoil. So eventually, the special social function fixes itself almost exclusively onto gold and silver.
So why precious metals? Well, it wasn't an accident. Their natural physical properties just made them uniquely suited for this social role. Every piece of gold is pretty much the same. You can divide it up precisely and then melt it back together. It lasts forever, and it packs a lot of value into a small, portable package. So social practice sort of latches onto the natural characteristics that best serve the economic need.
And this relationship is just perfectly captured in this famous line from Marx. Money is a social creation. It's not a natural thing. Gold and silver aren't born as money. But once society creates the social need for money, the nature of gold and silver makes them the perfect candidates for the job. The social function and the natural form just click together in this almost perfect synthesis.
And with that, the logical puzzle is solved. We've traced this whole path from the lonely commodity to the dead end of barter, to the emergence of this universal equivalent, and finally to that function crystallizing in one specific object, money. That invisible social substance of value now has a tangible, independent, universally recognized body in the real world.
And of course, just as Marx solves one problem, he immediately presents us with a new and even more profound one. What happens now that value has its own independent existence as money? What new powers and contradictions does this let loose on the world? The simple circuit of selling to buy, commodity, money, commodity, is now joined by a totally new and much more powerful form. Money, commodity, money. Buying something in order to sell it for more money. The emergence of money itself creates the possibility of capital. And that is exactly where we'll pick things up in our next explainer.